My name is Jack Burgess. I modeled Yosemite Valley Railroad. In a previous video, I talked about design elements for multi-deck layouts, which I have. In this one, I want to talk about design elements for a single deck layout that might help you if you're planning on building a layout someday, or maybe even making some changes on your own layout. I'm going to start with what I think is probably the biggest design choice, and that is the height of the layout. My layout, this section right here, is 46 inches off the floor, and it works out really well for me. I'm just under 6 feet tall. If you're shorter, you might want something a little bit lower. I think what I did initially a long time ago, maybe 30 years ago, I actually had a little switching layout, and I brought it into this space and put it on some boards and got it up, and that's how I decided how high my layout should be. This one works well because you can see what's going on, and you're not too high, not too low. I would not want anything lower because now you're looking down at things. The most realistic view that you can have of a layout is if your head was actually right here, and now you were seeing it just as you would if it was a real railroad. The other thing you need to keep in mind is how far or how wide the layout is. This section right here from the armrest to the backdrop is about 4 feet. I cannot reach that. I can't reach to take care of anything. Here, I cannot reach these cars to switch them. These cars, and that doesn't make any difference to me because these cars are on display. I never run them. Same thing with these cars. But here, the track is close enough so I can use my uncoupling and so forth, and I can see what I'm doing and so forth. So that's some things you need to kind of think about in how far back the tracks are. Another thing I want to point out is you don't need to have your layout space even all the way through. You'll see here there's a little angle. This is pulled out from this section because I wanted to be able to model this station full size. Here there was nothing, and so there's no reason to have the layout extend out to here because there was nothing there. So this lets you get a little closer when you're doing switching and so forth and throwing switches. The armrests, I love them. I've got 3 of them. There's one here, and there's another one. I do not allow anybody to put switch lists or throttles or anything on the layout. The layout was not designed to put up with things that are heavy. I have scale size switch stands, for example. And so this makes it real easy to, if you're thinking about what you want to do here, to be able to rest your arms or put your paper here, whatever you need to do, and not put it on the layout. The other major switching location is El Portel, and there's an armrest there also. Now, another thing that I did, I could have moved this in, but I did it a lot on this other side, is this section of the layout is cantilevered from the legs. What that gives you is a lot more space, not that you need it, but it makes the whole thing seem much more open. And I don't have a lot of space in here. This is wide enough for 2 people to pass. But by having the armrests, one is it gets people out of the way. And this also gives me a place where if I have 2 or 3 visitors to see the layout, we can stand around here and answer questions and so forth. So I really like having this in and not be right there where your feet are kicking on it. So we're now around the corner from the previous portion of the layout. This section is 13 inches deep. The track is about as close as I would want to have it to this. You could accidentally knock a train off with an elbow, but remember this is a double deck layout, and if I move the track any further in, you're not going to be able to see it because it's your view is hidden by the second deck. But this does work. It's wide enough to have some scenery. There was a little farm here. I built the buildings for that, for example. But basically, this is a way to get from major area around to the next area. So it doesn't have to be 4 feet wide or anything else. There's absolutely no value of making it any wider. One other thing you might want to think about is how far your track is from the edge of your layout and the possibility of having a derailment and something falls on the floor. So that could be a factor that you might want to keep in mind, is maybe take this track, move it back a couple inches so that if something fell over, you're okay. So now we're around the corner from the last section of the layout. One thing I want to mention is that track looked like it was level, and it is not. It drops down a little bit and drops down even more, drops down a full inch or two around the corner here, and then it climbs up again. And I think it just adds a little more interest. If you have flat track, it looks like it's on a piece of plywood, where this is actually on a section of plywood, but it has some very, very gentle grades. Now, that section that we've just saw was out in the San Joaquin Valley, which is flat, more or less flat. Everything has drainage. Water has to go somewhere. But now we're up in the foothills. And to make that more obvious, I actually raised the fascia here, and there's a cut here. Now, this is a passing track. This is the main line. But you can still see what you need to see to do switching and so forth. So this kind of lets a viewer realize that now they're starting to climb up into the foothills that are leading up to El Portal and Yosemite National Park. Here we're continuing on. The fascia drops down just above the river. If I had it here, I think it wouldn't look as good because it would look like the water's going to flow into here. So this kind of hides it. And then another curve, no square corners. Everything is just flowing and continues on, and this gets you into Merced Falls. Again, the fascia is curved, and the width of the layout here varies. This is about 3 feet wide. Up here it's a couple feet wide. That gave me room for this massive structure, and this is only a fourth the size of the prototype, but it gives you an idea of how big that structure was. But all the track is within 14 inches or so. So when someone's switching, it's very easy to see what they're doing, uncouple cars and so forth. Now we're at El Portal. This is the end of the line. The main line is climbed 18 inches from Merced to this point. That's about a 240-foot mainline run because of the double decks. But right here, we're only 53 inches off the floor because the floor is a 6-inch high raised floor. So this is higher off the floor than at Merced, but I like the idea because we are supposed to be higher in elevation, and so we are closer to the track. So it seems appropriate that now you're up in the mountains and the track is higher off the floor. So it works. This curve right here, let me include this building, which was an important shipping building. It blocks view of the track, but operators can go around the edge here and do everything they need to do. So again, this flows in so that the main line and the switching areas are closer to the operator than they would be if the front fascia was way out here. So it all works out really well. One thing you might want to keep in mind, that something that worked out really well for me, is I only have one major switching yard on a wall. So you might start on one wall and then go around to the next wall for another one and next so forth. So you have a lot of room between the yards. I only run a 7-car train, and but if I was running 20 cars to 30 cars, you would have that situation where the caboose is in one town and the engine is the next town. So even when someone is switching one location and the next one is over here, the train actually leaves and takes a little bit of time, and then it shows up in the next spot. So that's something to keep in mind when you can, if you have enough space. Before I started this layout, when I was actually designing it, I had gone to the California State Archivist and was able to purchase copies of the actual plans drawn by the railroad for the entire railroad. And so I did not invent yards. I knew where sidings were. In the most part, I was able to put the siding on the correct side of the main line. This particular one, I had a 1925 plan for the yard because it was changed several times. What I did is I took it, I rescaled it so it was the same scale as my drawings for the layout, cut out pieces of the prototype drawing, and put them together. And so this is about 70% the length of the real prototype. I just took out some straight track here, probably a couple feet here, a few feet there, and just skinnied everything down. But it has every single switch, every single siding, every passing track. So it is still, for operators, this is the most difficult job, is to build your train in this yard, because you need to build your train, back the train out, caboose first, turn on the Y, and then head out. The other yard at Merced is much easier because it's more traditional. The locomotive is already turned, you build your train, the caboose is already in the proper location, and so forth. So it makes things more interesting here. I mentioned that I used the original track plans to design this yard. One reason is because I wanted it to be prototype, but I also knew that because it was prototype, it would work. If you invent your own yards, it would be very easy to later realize I should have had a different switch, or it should have been a different location. It works just so very well. If you're not modeling a real prototype, what I would do is go to Google Earth, find some yards that are similar to what you want. If you're modeling the Midwest, look at how they had the yards around buildings in very small towns and so forth, and then take that. Once I built the track, I have never moved a single piece of track. Everything works because it's based on the prototype. They did not build switching problems. They solved switching problems. That's an important thing. Also want to talk about duck unders. I have a duck under. I wish I didn't, but you're in a small space here, a 20 by 20 garage, and to take advantage of the room, this is the only solution I can figure out. I made it as high as possible. This is 52 inches off the floor. There is a track under here. I made it as narrow as possible. It's only maybe 10 inches wide. I have a grab iron, and it is a YV grab iron, right here to help people get under. I have had people that had to get down on the floor and crawl on their knees. Like I say, I wish I didn't have to have it. When I was building my layout, this was all removable, and the bridge wasn't there. And so this was all sitting over here on the floor, so I could get in and with tools and do all that kind of stuff. There aren't that many solutions to this. I've seen a lot of articles about having drop-down bridges. On my first layout, I had that one over here right on the door. It worked well, except on open houses. You can't be running trains and having people drop down the bridge so they can get in here. Even if you didn't have open houses and you had operating sessions, you would have to make sure that all the operators can be in the same area and no one has to drop a bridge down to follow their train. So I wish I had a solution. If I were to start over, I could probably do 3 sides of the room, but I don't think I get as much track as I have. So for me, it's something I put up with. So now I want to talk about a few very simple ideas, not so much about design, but if you're designing a layout and you say, well, that's not going to work because this is the SP station, SP main line. I could have made the fascia out here wider. I don't think it would have added anything, but the issue I had is this building, if it was full size, would be out to here. Same thing for these two buildings. This building would be out to here. You can tell this is only a part of the building. So what I did is I took the fascia and went up and around these and painted this the same color as the fascia. What that does is it makes it look like it's okay, like this building looks okay, but you don't notice it. it's kind of hidden. Okay, this shot is of the Santa Fe crossing. One of the things that you'll notice is a seam back here. When I built the layout, this is one piece of Homosote and this is another, and I just filled it in and painted it, and it was good for a long time, but I'm not sure what I would do now. I think I would at least have a seam that was someplace that wasn't so obvious. Maybe it was hidden behind trees. I hadn't thought about that when I was designing the layout and building it. But I wish I had come up with a better solution. And I don't know what that solution would be, except still using long sheets as much as you can. And when you're going to have a seam, maybe have a piece of plywood back here that you can glue instead of having the wood screw show. Glue it in place and maybe it won't move. But what I wanted to show you on this scene is, and the next shot is, what can you do about situations like this? Trains and tracks are coming in. I wanted to model it because that's exactly what they had, including all this switchwork and so forth. But the track is running right into the backdrop. And it wouldn't be very easy to have a painting on there. That just wouldn't work. So what I did is I just put a car on a grade crossing right there. And I think it's enough that it blocks your view and you go on. You don't sit there and think about it that much. Let me show you another example of the same idea. Another example of trying to block a view. Here we have a major road crossing the tracks and running right into the backdrop. So for this one, I just took a truck, made it look like it was coming out of this building, and it blocks the view. And I think it's, again, one of those things you kind of glance at it, you don't think about it, and you go on rather than sit there and wonder, where's the road going? So that does it for this episode. I hope that if you have a layout you want to design or build a new layout or change things on your own layout, I've given you some ideas that you can think about that might make that effort more successful. See you next time.